The sound of the waves was the first thing I heard every morning. Soft, steady, predictable, like an old friend whispering, "You're still here." I'd sit by the window with my cup of tea and watch the sunlight crawl across the water. It was my quiet ritual, one that kept me close to Richard even years after he passed. Our beach house in Monterey Bay was more than just home. It was a memory. Every wall carried his laughter, every floorboard his steady footsteps. Sometimes, when the wind was strong enough, I could almost hear his voice calling my name from the porch. That house was our dream, and my peace. That morning felt like any other. The ocean was calm, the sky painted in streaks of pale orange, and I had no reason to expect the day would change everything. Thank you for joining me today for another beautiful story. Don't forget to subscribe and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Give this video a thumbs up to keep the stories coming, because tomorrow, I'll share another one that'll stay on your mind long after it's over. Now, let's continue. When I heard the front door creak open, I didn't think much of it. Donald had a key. He'd visit from time to time, usually when he needed money or when his girlfriend, Abby, was out of patience. "Morning, Mom," he said, stepping inside with a cup of coffee in one hand and his phone in the other. He didn't hug me. He rarely did these days. "Morning, sweetheart," I replied, smiling. "You're up early. Everything all right?" He glanced at me, then at the view outside. "Yeah, everything's fine." There was something off in his tone. Flat, calculated. I noticed the way his eyes moved around the room, scanning the furniture like he was memorizing it. He took a slow sip of his coffee, then said it, so casually, so coldly, that for a second I didn't even understand. "Mom, we're going tomorrow. I've sold your beach house." I froze. He relaxed, taking that as approval. "Good. I knew you'd understand." When he left a few minutes later, I stood in the doorway and watched his car disappear down the street. The same boy I once held in my arms now saw me as an obstacle, a signature waiting to be replaced, a burden he could manage like a business deal. As the sound of his engine faded, the silence in the house felt heavy. I turned to the framed photograph on the mantel, Richard in his fishing hat, grinning under the summer sun. "You were right, Richard," I whispered. "We raised him too soft. Too entitled." The wind outside grew stronger, whistling through the window cracks like a warning. I sank into the old rocking chair, Richard's favorite, and stared at the floorboards. The same ones he'd built with his own hands 40 years ago. The thought of strangers walking across them made my chest ache. Hours passed, but I couldn't rest. I replayed every word, every expression on Donald's face. He wasn't sorry. Not even unsure. He believed he had the right. By nightfall, I stood by the window, the ocean darker now, waves crashing harder. The reflection of my own face in the glass startled me, not because I looked old, but because I looked angry. For years, I had told myself that motherhood meant forgiving everything. But that night, I realized forgiveness has limits. I thought about all the times Donald had borrowed money and never paid it back. The way he and Abby avoided visiting unless they needed something. The small, cutting remarks about how Mom can't handle things alone anymore. It wasn't about care. It was about control. And he thought he had won. I stayed awake until morning, pacing through every room, touching every wall as if saying goodbye. But deep down, I wasn't ready to say goodbye. Not yet. Something inside me shifted, a quiet, deliberate change. I wasn't going to fight him the way he expected. I wouldn't shout, beg, or threaten. No. I'd wait. I'd watch. And when the time came, I'd remind my son exactly who he underestimated. Because the truth is, Richard didn't just leave me this house. He left me options. Donald thought I was too weak to stop him. But what he didn't know was that I'd been preparing for a moment like this all along. The sea outside roared louder, as if echoing my thoughts. I looked out toward the horizon, whispered a promise to myself, and turned off the lights. Tomorrow, he'd come back with movers. He'd think the plan was working. But this time, the game was mine. What would you do if your own child betrayed your trust like that? Would you stay silent like me? Or fight back immediately? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I'll be reading all of it. The night Donald told me he'd sold the beach house, sleep never came. I sat up in bed, watching the moonlight crawl across the ceiling, my heart aching in a way I couldn't describe. I wanted to believe it was just a misunderstanding, that my son, my only child, wouldn't betray me like that. But deep down I knew. The silence between us at dinner wasn't confusion. It was guilt. I pulled the blanket tighter and whispered into the darkness. Richard, I wish you were here. You'd know what to do. And then, like a whisper from memory, I heard his voice again. Calm, patient, always 3 steps ahead. Jess, if you ever find yourself cornered, remember where the real power lies. That's when it hit me. The floorboard. I pushed myself out of bed, the wooden floor creaking beneath my feet. My knees protested as I knelt beside the dresser in the corner, the same one that hadn't moved since Richard died. I hesitated for a moment, staring at the faint scratch he made years ago. He told me once, "That's our secret, Jess. Just in case." I slipped a butter knife under the edge of the board and lifted it carefully. Dust scattered in the air, and there it was, the small metal box wrapped in a cloth napkin. My hands shook as I lifted it out and set it on the bed. Inside was a stack of documents, yellowed from time, and an envelope marked in Richard's handwriting. Only if you must, Jess. Even after all these years, seeing his handwriting made my chest tighten. He had always been the cautious one, the planner, the protector. I had laughed at him back then, thinking life was too short to be suspicious. But tonight, I wasn't laughing. I opened the manila folder first. The papers inside were our trust documents, property deeds, and financial notes. I recognized the seal of the law firm from San Jose. There was something else, too, a USB flash drive. I turned it over in my hand, my reflection small and distorted in the metal. Richard never told me what was on it, and for a second, I considered plugging it in right away. But then I stopped. Something told me to wait. The next morning, I woke to the sound of truck doors slamming. When I looked out the window, my heart sank. 2 movers were already hauling boxes from the living room. Donald was standing by the porch, giving orders like a man who'd been waiting for this day his whole life. I walked downstairs slowly, keeping my voice calm. "You're up early." He turned, flashing that same forced smile. "Yeah, just getting a head start, Mom. Less stress for you this way." I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell him I knew everything, the forged signature, the lies, the betrayal. But instead, I smiled faintly and said, "You've thought of everything, haven't you?" He chuckled nervously. "That's what sons are for." My hands curled into fists behind my back. If only he knew what kind of woman he was dealing with now. When the movers finally left, I sat alone at the dining table, staring at the empty spaces on the walls. Every nail hole felt like a wound. That house wasn't just wood and paint. It was my life. The place where Richard and I built dreams, argued over nonsense, laughed until we cried. Donald thought he was stripping me of everything. But I still had something he didn't. The truth. That night, I made a phone call I hadn't made in years. "Linda, it's Jessica." There was a pause, then a familiar warm voice. "Jessica. Good heavens, it's been ages. How are you?" I hesitated. "Not good. I need your help." Linda Carson had been Richard's estate lawyer before she retired. Sharp as a blade, discreet, and loyal. If anyone could help me, it was her. I explained everything. Donald's sale, the forged signature, the transfer. She didn't interrupt once. When I finished, she was silent for a moment. Then she said quietly, "Jessica, do you still have the original trust papers Richard left you?" "Yes," I said, glancing at the metal box beside me. "Good. Because if Richard did what I think he did, you may still own that house." I blinked. "What do you mean?" "There's a clause Richard insisted on including, A life estate clause. It means the property can't legally be sold or transferred without your living consent. Even if your son forged your name, the sale would never hold up in court. And if the buyer was part of the forgery, she paused. That's felony fraud. My heart skipped a beat. So, it's not over? Linda gave a small laugh. Far from it. Send me copies of everything. I'll go through them tomorrow. When we hung up, I sat for a long time, staring at the documents. The ache in my chest was still there, but it had changed. It wasn't sorrow anymore. It was fuel. Later that night, I plugged in the flash drive. My laptop hummed to life. Folder after folder appeared. Financial records, land deeds, contracts, and one document labeled Contingency Plan D. I opened it. What I saw made my mouth go dry. Richard had quietly purchased another property, an adjoining lot, completely under my name. It wasn't part of the beach house sale because Donald never knew it existed. That land, according to the paperwork, held mineral rights, and a valuation far higher than the house itself. My hands trembled, but I was smiling. Richard had outsmarted everyone, even from the grave. I leaned back in my chair, looking toward the hallway where Donald's suitcase sat by the door. He thought he'd won. He thought I was weak, old, and easy to fool. But I wasn't the same woman who cried herself to sleep last night. I was the woman he underestimated. And for the first time in a long time, I whispered, "Game on, sweetheart." Have you ever kept a secret that later became your only way out? What kind of secret would you keep from your family if it could protect you? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. The sound of footsteps woke me up the next day. Heavy, hurried, and unfamiliar. I opened my eyes to see light flooding through the curtains. The house no longer smelled like coffee and salt air. It smelled like cardboard and dust. By the time I stepped into the hallway, the movers were already taking things off the walls. Pictures, mirrors, even the small wooden clock Richard built with his own hands. I stood there, barefoot, silent, watching strangers dismantle my life piece by piece. Donald was in the living room, clapping his hands, directing them as if he were the new owner. "Yeah, that goes with the antiques. Be careful with the vases, they're worth something," he said, his voice brisk and cold. Worth something. That was all he saw now. Value in things, not in people. "Donald," I said softly, "do you mind leaving the clock? It was your father's favorite." He turned briefly, barely meeting my eyes. "They'll take it, Mom. It's part of the staging deal. The buyers wanted everything left in place for a few days." I nodded slowly. "Of course." And just like that, I let them take everything. Even the small things that meant the world to me. The seashell lamp, the blanket Richard and I bought on our honeymoon in Florida, the framed photo from our first Christmas here. To anyone watching, I looked like a helpless old woman surrendering her home. But deep down, I knew what I was doing. Sometimes you win more by pretending you've already lost. By noon, the house was almost empty. I made coffee while Donald talked loudly on the phone. "Yes, wired already." "Yeah, 1.6, he said, pacing. "We'll finalize tomorrow. She's all set, she'll move in with me. No issues." $1.6 million. I felt the heat rise in my chest, but I kept my face calm. He hung up, turned toward me, and smiled like a salesman closing a deal. "Good news, Mom," he said cheerfully. "The sale went through faster than expected. I'll take care of everything. The bills, your medication, even your insurance. You don't have to worry about a thing." Worry. That word stung. I had worried for him his entire life. His grades, his career, his broken marriage. I never thought I'd have to worry about being protected from him. "That's thoughtful of you," I said softly. "Your father would be proud." He gave a small laugh, too confident to catch the sharp edge in my tone. "Yeah, he taught me well. If only he knew how well." After lunch, he left to meet with someone downtown. As soon as I heard his car pull away, I took out my phone and called Linda. She picked up instantly. Jessica, I've got updates. My pulse quickened. Tell me. I reviewed the property documents, she said. You're listed as a life tenant. No one can sell that house legally without your living consent. Donald's forged sale will trigger a verification request once the bank updates the records. The fraud will expose itself automatically. I let out a slow breath. So the sale will bounce back. Exactly. And when it does, anyone who signed or profited from it will be liable. That means Donald and whoever he's working with. I smiled faintly. Then let it play out. I won't lift a finger. Linda chuckled. You've always been smarter than people give you credit for. I've just had practice, I said quietly. And this time, I'm not the one who'll lose. I spent the next few hours doing what Donald never imagined I could, moving money. Richard had always been careful with his assets, but he made sure everything was accessible to me alone. Using the old documents from the metal box, I began transferring portions of the trust to a new identity. Jessica Morgan, one Richard had set up years ago for emergencies. He used to joke that Morgan was my escape name, the one I'd use if I ever got tired of everyone's nonsense. I never thought I'd need it. But that day, it became my armor. As I typed in the final confirmation code, I felt a strange sense of calm. For the first time in days, I wasn't just surviving. I was strategizing. By evening, Donald returned, humming. He seemed lighter, more confident, as if the world finally made sense again. He found me sitting in the living room, staring out at the ocean. You've been quiet today, he said. Just thinking, I replied. About what? I turned to him and smiled faintly. About how fast life changes. One moment, everything you love is in your hands, and the next, it's gone. He nodded without really listening. That's true. But sometimes letting go is the only way forward, Mom. You'll see. This is for the best. For the best. I wanted to laugh. He had no idea what was coming. Maybe you're right, I said instead. You've grown into such a decisive man. He grinned, pleased with himself. Finally, right? I sipped my tea slowly. Oh, finally. When he went upstairs, I walked outside. The sun was setting, painting the water gold. 4 years, this beach had been my peace. Now, it would be the stage for something else entirely. I took out my phone again, sent a final message to Linda. Proceed with the filings. Make sure the notifications go to the new account name. Within minutes, her reply came. Already done. The system will flag the sale by morning. You're untouchable now. Untouchable. That word lingered in my mind like a prayer. I went back inside, noticing how empty the house felt, stripped of furniture, but full of ghosts. I ran my hand along the wall as I walked past the hallway where Richard's picture once hung. I could almost hear his laugh, low and reassuring. You'd be proud of me, Rich, I whispered. Your plan worked. Then I smiled. Because while Donald thought he'd taken everything from me, he'd only freed me to act. He saw an aging mother too tired to fight. But what he didn't see was the woman building a quiet empire behind his back. Around 9 p.m., Donald came downstairs again, dressed in a new shirt, smelling of cologne. Going somewhere? I asked lightly. He smirked. Dinner. Need to celebrate closing the deal. Abby's meeting me at the restaurant. Abby. His girlfriend. The one he'd claimed was just a friend. I said nothing, only nodded. Don't wait up, he added. I won't, I said softly. When the door closed behind him, I looked at the ticking clock, the only thing they hadn't taken. My pulse matched its rhythm. Every tick was a countdown to his realization, his panic, his fall. At that same moment, miles away in downtown Monterey, Donald raised his glass across the table from Abby. He was grinning, full of himself, laughing louder than usual. To new beginnings, he said. She clinked her glass against his, but her eyes flickered with something he didn't catch, unease. Because while Donald celebrated, My quiet revenge had already begun. The bank system would flag the property within hours. His funds, the ones he bragged about, would be frozen before sunrise. And when he came home, nothing he believed he owned would belong to him anymore. While Donald celebrated at the restaurant with Abby, thinking his life was about to get easier, his downfall had already been set in motion by the woman he underestimated most. By the fourth day, I'd learned to wear silence like a mask. Donald mistook it for surrender. He thought I was too broken to think straight. That's what made his confidence dangerous. He asked me to dress up that evening. "We're celebrating, Mom," he said, standing by the doorway in his pressed white shirt. "Abby's joining us. You'll love the place. Ocean view, candlelight, the works." He was glowing, satisfied. My son, my own flesh and blood, had sold everything Richard and I built, and yet he had the audacity to smile like a man who'd earned his fortune honestly. I said nothing. I just nodded, pretending to fix my necklace while studying his reflection in the mirror. His shoulders looked lighter, his voice cheerier. He truly believed the world was now his. As I buttoned my sweater, I whispered to myself, "Just one more night, Jessica. One more night and the show begins." By the fourth day, I'd learned to wear silence like a mask. Donald mistook it for surrender. He thought I was too broken to think straight. That's what made his confidence dangerous. He asked me to dress up that evening. "We're celebrating, Mom," he said, standing by the doorway in his pressed white shirt. "Abby's joining us. You'll love the place. Ocean view, candlelight, the works." He was glowing, satisfied. My son, my own flesh and blood, had sold everything Richard and I built, and yet he had the audacity to smile like a man who'd earned his fortune honestly. I said nothing. I just nodded, pretending to fix my necklace while studying his reflection in the mirror. His shoulders looked lighter, his voice cheerier. He truly believed the world was now his. As I buttoned my sweater, I whispered to myself, "Just one more night, Jessica. One more night and the show begins." When the food arrived, I took slow bites, pretending to listen as Donald boasted about real estate, new partners, and how he planned to invest the rest smartly. "You'll be proud of me, Mom," he said, leaning closer. "I'm taking control of my life now. I'll make sure you're comfortable." Comfortable. Such a cold, distant word. Not loved. Not cared for. Just comfortable. I looked out at the waves and said quietly, "You sound just like your father when he used to plan our future." His face softened for a second. Maybe guilt, maybe confusion. "Dad would have wanted this," he muttered. I turned to him. "No, Donald. Your father would have wanted you to earn it." The table went quiet. He straightened his tie, avoiding my gaze. "Let's not make this emotional. It's done. The papers are signed." I smiled faintly. "You're right. It's done." He didn't catch the weight of my tone. By the time dessert came, my phone vibrated. A message from Linda flashed across the screen. "All documents verified. Transfer complete. He'll find out soon enough." I felt my pulse steady. My breathing slowed. Every detail was falling into place. You see, Richard had always been a cautious man. He'd set up 2 wills, one public, one private. The private one, hidden beneath the floorboards, transferred full control of his company's shares, assets, and all properties, including this beach house, directly to me through a sealed trust. Donald's sale meant nothing legally. The bank was processing a fraud claim that would freeze all associated accounts within 48 hours. The buyer's money? Gone. The deed? Void. And Donald? He'd soon realize he never owned a single brick of that house. I excused myself to the restroom, leaving them to their shallow laughter. In the mirror, I barely recognized the woman staring back. Not broken, not fragile. Composed. Ready. When I returned, Abby was scrolling through her phone, giggling. Donald was bragging about flying to Miami for a business opportunity. That was when I said, almost casually, Oh, I forgot to tell you, Donald. I got a call from the bank this morning. They said the account you used for the house was frozen. He blinked. What? I tilted my head. Fraud investigation, I think they said. Something about the title transfer not matching the trust records. The color drained from his face. That's impossible. The documents. I interrupted softly. You mean the documents you forged? Abby's eyes widened. Forged? Donald glared at me, his voice trembling. You can't prove that. I leaned forward. Oh, but Linda can. She handled your father's estate. She's quite good at keeping records. Silence. Only the sound of waves below and the faint clinking of glasses around us. Abby stood abruptly, muttering something about needing air. Donald stayed frozen, his jaw tight. I could almost hear the storm in his mind. We drove home in silence. The night felt heavy, electric. I could sense his anger boiling beneath the surface. When we arrived, he slammed the car door and turned to me. What did you do? I stepped out calmly, holding my purse. I did what your father taught me to do. Protect what's ours. He clenched his fists. You think you've won? I smiled. No, Donald. I think I've started. He stormed into his car and sped away, tires screeching. I watched the taillights disappear into the fog. For a moment, I almost pitied him, the son who sold his soul for money he'd never truly touch. Back inside, I poured myself a glass of wine, the one he said I didn't drink. My phone buzzed again, another message from Linda. He'll receive the notice by morning. You might want to leave before he does something foolish. I took a slow sip and whispered, let him try. Because the truth was, I wasn't running anymore. I was waiting. Can you imagine sitting across from someone who betrayed you, pretending to smile while planning their downfall? Could you keep calm like I did, or would you confront them right there at dinner? Tell me in the comments. The call came on a Thursday morning. My coffee was still steaming, the waves outside humming their steady rhythm, when my phone rang. Mom. For a second, I didn't recognize the voice. It was trembling, fragile, stripped of its usual confidence. Donald. I said slowly. There was a pause, then a shaky breath. Yeah, it's me. He sounded smaller somehow, as if the arrogance had been washed out of him. I didn't know who else to call, he said. Everything's gone. Abby left. The money's. It's all gone, Mom. I leaned back in my chair, letting the silence stretch. He'd expected me to scream or hang up. But I wanted him to hear the calm in my tone when I finally spoke. Where are you? I'm at a motel outside Fresno. I haven't eaten in a day. My chest tightened, not from pity, but from the ache of realizing how far my own son had fallen. Come home, I said softly. I'll send a car. He arrived the next afternoon, thinner, paler, a man carved down by his own choices. His once sharp suits were replaced with a wrinkled shirt and tired jeans. The driver pulled up to the gate of my new home, a quiet estate tucked in Pebble Beach. The kind of place that radiated wealth without having to announce it. Donald stepped out, blinking at the mansion before him. Mom. What is this? I smiled gently. Home. He turned slowly, taking it all in. The glass walls, the manicured garden, the ocean view. His confusion was almost painful to watch. Mom, how did you afford this? I looked him straight in the eye. Your father left me more than you'll ever know. He swallowed hard, guilt flickering behind his eyes. I thought you lost everything. So did you, I replied. For the next few days, I let him settle in. I cooked for him, the same way I used to when he was a child. Pancakes in the morning, his favorite roast chicken for dinner. He ate in silence, humbled. Every bite seemed to taste like regret. One night, after dinner, he sat across from me at the kitchen island, his voice low. Mom, I don't deserve this. Any of this. I folded the napkin beside me. You're right, I said softly. But sometimes, life gives us a second chance to see what we destroyed. He rubbed his eyes, his hands trembling. I was so stupid. Abby. She convinced me that selling the house was a smart move. She said it was what Dad would have wanted. But she left as soon as the money got frozen. Took the car too. I watched him crumble, tears forming at the edges of his eyes. It would have been easy to reach out, to forgive. But forgiveness, in this case, wasn't the lesson he needed. Instead, I said, "You blamed her for your choices?" He hesitated. I just wanted to prove something. I thought I could be successful like Dad. I nodded slowly. Richard worked for his success. You stole yours. He flinched. Over the next week, I noticed him trying to make up for things. Cleaning the dishes, running errands, even fixing the mailbox. But guilt doesn't erase betrayal. It just decorates it. He asked one evening, "Mom, are you still angry?" I smiled faintly. Anger fades. Lessons don't. He didn't know it, but I'd already begun the final move. While Donald was mopping guilt off the marble floor, I was on the phone with Linda, finalizing a trust revision that would change everything again. The new clause ensured that Donald's name was permanently removed from any legal tie to Richard's estate. The second part, and my personal touch, ensured that he'd receive a monthly allowance. Just enough to live, never enough to control. Justice doesn't always have to be loud, Linda said over the phone. No, I whispered. Sometimes it just has to last. That night, Donald knocked on my door. He looked exhausted, his face shadowed by remorse. "Mom, I know I hurt you," he began, his voice shaking. "And I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't have anyone left." I let the silence hang, studying the boy I'd once rocked to sleep. His eyes were red, his lips trembling. He wasn't the man who'd sold my house anymore. He was the child who used to hide behind me during thunderstorms. "I'm not asking for money," he continued. "I just want a chance to fix things. To earn back your trust." I exhaled slowly. You can't buy back trust, Donald. But you can start by learning what it costs. He nodded weakly, tears falling this time. "Thank you for not shutting the door." I stood and walked toward the window. "You're still my son," I said quietly. "But that doesn't mean I'll protect you from consequences." He looked at me, unsure whether that was forgiveness or a warning. Maybe it was both. The next morning, I left a note on the kitchen counter. "Donald, I've gone to meet Linda. Breakfast is in the oven. Please stay home and rest." He never knew that while I was meeting Linda, I was actually at the county registrar's office, filing the final documents. By the end of that day, everything was official. The estate was secure under my new name, Jessica Morgan. The trust clauses were locked and sealed. Donald's inheritance, irrevocably removed. When I returned that evening, he was sitting on the porch, watching the ocean. "It's beautiful here," he said quietly. "I forgot how peaceful the sea sounds when you're not chasing anything." I sat beside him, letting the breeze brush past us. "Mom," he said after a pause, "thank you for letting me come home." I looked at him, my expression soft. "Home isn't where you live, Donald. It's where you learn." He nodded, not realizing those words would be the last piece he'd feel before my final move began. Because I hadn't forgiven him. Not yet. I was simply letting him believe I had. Have you ever forgiven someone just to teach them a lesson later? Do you think I should truly forgive my son? Or finish what she started? Tell me in the comments. Morning light spilled through the curtains, warm and quiet. But peace never lasts long in a house built on secrets. That day, I asked Donald to meet me in the study, the one Richard used to call his sanctuary. The same room where our future had once been planned, and now, where it would end for him. He entered cautiously, his voice low. "You wanted to talk?" I gestured for him to sit. My desk was neatly arranged, a folder, a fountain pen, and 2 envelopes. One sealed, one open. He looked at them, his forehead creased. "Donald," I began softly, "there's something about your father's will that you never knew. Something I think it's time you heard." He leaned forward, suspicion already creeping into his tone. "Mom, I've heard enough about Dad's will. That's what started all this mess." I smiled faintly. "No, sweetheart. What started this was greed." He stiffened. I slid the open envelope toward him. "Your father wrote 2 clauses, one public, one private. The private one was meant to be revealed only if the heir showed loyalty." He frowned, scanning the page. "What is this supposed to mean?" "It means," I said slowly, "that the inheritance doesn't go to whoever signs the deed. It goes to whoever proves love and loyalty." His eyes darted between the paper and me. "Proves? What are you saying, Mom?" Before I could answer, a soft voice came from the doorway. "I think she's saying you failed, Donald." He turned sharply. There, standing in the doorway with 2 suitcases, was Abby. For a moment, Donald looked like he'd seen a ghost. His lips parted, his breath caught in his throat. "Abby. What are you doing here?" She walked in calmly, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor. "Hello, Donald." My heart didn't race. I had expected this moment. Donald stood up, confused, angry, desperate all at once. "Mom, what's going on? Why is she here?" I clasped my hands gently on the desk. "She's here because we both wanted to give you what you truly earned." Abby set the suitcases down and looked at me, then at him. "I told you once I loved you, Donald. And maybe I did. For a while. But watching you destroy your own mother? That wasn't love. That was cruelty." He blinked, stepping back. "Wait. Abby, you were with her? You planned this?" She nodded, unflinching. "From the very beginning. Your mother reached out after the sale, and I agreed to help her. You thought you were outsmarting everyone, but really, you were digging your own grave." Donald's voice cracked. "You used me." Abby crossed her arms. "No, Donald. You used everyone. I just helped your mother make sure you faced the truth." He turned toward me, fury and disbelief in his eyes. "Mom, how could you? You knew how much I loved her." I stood slowly. "You don't destroy people you love, Donald. You sold our home, your father's memory, for a bank account you couldn't even control. You wanted power. Well, now you'll see what that feels like when it's taken away." He slammed his fist on the desk. "You can't do this to me." "Oh, I already have," I said calmly. "Every penny you thought you earned was funneled through Richard's trust. Linda and I made sure of it. The buyer's refund was processed last night. The house, the money, all secured back under my name." Abby stepped forward, sliding a document onto the desk, a printed confirmation of the new trust transfer. "You're officially removed from everything, Donald. Permanently." He stood there, breathing hard, color draining from his face. This isn't legal. You can't." "Oh, it's very legal," I interrupted. "Your father's private clause made sure of it. I told you, he valued loyalty more than signatures." He looked between us, his voice trembling. "So this was all some kind of test?" I tilted my head. "In a way. Your father believed that wealth should never go to those who would abuse it. I just made sure his wishes were honored." He sank into the chair, running both hands through his hair. "You tricked me. Both of you." Abby's tone softened, almost regretful. "You tricked yourself, Donald. You just didn't see it until it was too late." The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. Finally, Donald whispered, "So that's it? I lose everything." I took a step forward. "No. You lose what never belonged to you. What you stole was returned to its rightful place." He looked up, his voice cracking. I'm your son. Yes, I said, my tone cold but steady. And that's why I didn't send you to prison the first time. Abby glanced at me, concern flickering briefly. Jessica. I met her eyes. He needs to understand that actions have consequences. Donald stood abruptly, his chair scraping the floor. You wouldn't. I looked at the clock. The seconds ticked louder than my heartbeat. You'll find out soon enough. In the distance, faint sirens began to wail. Donald froze. He turned to the window. What is that? I moved toward it slowly, pulling the curtain aside. Red and blue lights flickered against the ocean mist. They're coming for you, Donald. His eyes widened. For me. Why? I turned to face him. Forgery. Fraud. And let's not forget the buyer's claim you signed under a false title. He stepped back, shaking his head. You called the police? No, I said quietly. The bank did. Abby stepped closer to him. You should leave now, Donald. Running won't help, but at least you'll have time to think. He looked at both of us, desperation burning through his shame. You two planned this. You wanted to ruin me. I whispered. No, Donald. I wanted to save you. But you refused to be saved. The sound of sirens grew louder. Tires crunched on the gravel outside. He turned toward the back door, panic flooding his face. I can't go to prison. You should have thought of that, I said softly, before selling your soul. He hesitated one last time, staring at me with tears of rage and heartbreak. Then he ran out the side door, down the hill, disappearing into the trees. Abby exhaled shakily. Do you think he'll come back? I looked out the window again, the flashing lights reflecting off the glass. No, I said, my voice steady. But the past always does. The house went quiet again, except for the sound of waves crashing in the distance. I picked up Richard's photo from the shelf and held it close. You were right, I whispered. Loyalty always reveals the truth. Abby placed a hand on my shoulder. He'll realize one day that this was mercy. Maybe, I said softly. Or maybe this is the only way he'll ever learn. Outside, the sirens faded slowly, swallowed by the sea. But deep down, I knew this wasn't over. Not yet. Because when you raise a son like Donald, even victory feels like grief. What would you do if you had to expose your own child to protect what's right? Would you do what I did, or find another way? Share your thoughts below. The knock came at exactly 9:42 p.m. firm. Unforgiving. Final. Donald froze where he stood, his glass of whiskey trembling in his hand. Through the living room window, blue and red lights painted the walls in fractured waves. The echo of police radios filled the air, sharp, cold, official. I didn't move. I just stood there beside the ocean window, watching the night swallow what remained of my son's pride. The officers stepped inside after I opened the door, their expressions tight with formality. They were polite. I had expected as much. The detective's voice was steady as he said, Mr. Donald Reed, we have some questions regarding the fraudulent sale of a property under your mother's name. The knock came at exactly 9:42 p.m. firm. Unforgiving. Final. Donald froze where he stood, his glass of whiskey trembling in his hand. Through the living room window, blue and red lights painted the walls in fractured waves. The echo of police radios filled the air, sharp, cold, official. I didn't move. I just stood there beside the ocean window, watching the night swallow what remained of my son's pride. The officers stepped inside after I opened the door, their expressions tight with formality. They were polite. I had expected as much. The detective's voice was steady as he said, Mr. Donald Reed, we have some questions regarding the fraudulent sale of a property under your mother's name. Donald's eyes darted to me, pleading, desperate, searching for mercy that no longer existed. Mom, tell them. Tell them it's a mistake. You know I didn't mean. I didn't answer. I simply stepped aside. He tried again, louder this time. Mom, please. You can fix this. You always fix things. The officers placed cuffs on his wrists. The metal clicked, clean and decisive. He flinched, not because it hurt, but because for the first time in his life, he realized he wasn't in control. I turned away. I couldn't look at him anymore. As they led him out, the waves outside roared against the cliffs, almost as if the sea itself was applauding the moment. I remember Richard once saying, "The ocean has its own justice, Jess. It always takes back what's stolen." Tonight, I finally understood what he meant. When the door closed behind them, silence rushed in like a ghost. I felt it settle in my chest, heavy but freeing. I walked slowly to the window, my bare feet brushing against the marble floor. The reflection staring back at me wasn't the same woman who once lived for her son's approval. That woman died the day Donald sold my home. This new woman, she was born from betrayal. From quiet nights of planning and pretending. From learning that revenge doesn't always roar, sometimes it whispers, then watches. The sound of the ocean filled the house. I could almost hear Richard's voice again, soft and steady, echoing through the years. Real strength is quiet, Jess. The kind that never has to shout. He was right. I didn't need to shout. My silence had done the work. I poured myself a cup of tea, not to celebrate, but to steady my hands. The steam rose in slow curls, blurring the reflection of the police lights still flashing outside. A part of me pitied Donald. He had fallen so far, so fast. The boy who once built sandcastles with his father on this same shore had become a man who destroyed everything for greed. I whispered to the room. He sold the house, but in the end, he sold himself. There was no joy in that truth. Only peace. The kind that comes after a long storm. The following morning, I sat on the balcony overlooking Monterey Bay. The sun broke through the horizon, painting the water gold. Abby joined me quietly, a cup of coffee in her hands. She didn't say much, she didn't need to. I rose, brushed the sand from my hands, and walked back inside. The house no longer felt empty. It felt earned. As I closed the curtains, I looked out one last time at the waves crashing below and smiled faintly. The story was over. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel the need to explain it to anyone. He sold the house, but in the end, he sold himself. And maybe that's the lesson. Sometimes, the loudest revenge is the silence that follows. Would you ever go this far to get justice for yourself? Or would you have handled it differently? Tell me in the comments. I read every one. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.